I wanted to play this clip from today for you actually, and sort of get your reaction to it because it really hits on a lot of the ways that he's talking about, I don't know, class in the United States and his popular support here.
For too long, working people of this nation, the middle class in this country, the backbone of the country, have been dealt out. It's time to deal them back in. I ran for president.
Some West Wing moment.
I ran for president saying it was time to rebuild the backbone of the nation. And by that, I was very precise. The middle class has been the backbone of this nation.
Backbone.
I couldn't have been any clearer. That's why I wrote both these bills in the first place and took them to the people. I campaigned on them. The American people spoke. They have no doubt about what I ran on. Both these bills were all what I talked about. But guess what? 81 million people voted for me. For too long, working people in this class in this country, the backbone of the country.
Hold up, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what your reaction to the way that he's talking right there about this kind of this. I mean, like he obviously when he gives talks to reporters and stuff, he's going to hit up a certain kind of rhetoric, but this was an interesting moment because I don't know. I feel like it fizzles a lot when you watch it. But this is like Biden trying to do almost like an FDR style thing where he's like calling upon all the people who supported him to, to stand up and to encourage people to finally push through the gridlock. But I don't know. It's that kind of like Sleepy Joe version of it that I don't really think is going to move the ball very much.
Yeah, I mean, what is he really doing? I mean, I feel like in this whole thing, he's present because you read about him or you'll see a speech from him, but is he really, doing anything remotely like what FDR did? I mean, a few weeks back, or a month or so ago, Sanders did this tour around certain red states. He went to Indiana, he went to Iowa, and I think actually he went to Michigan, which is a red state, but, kind of a purplish state. And he was trying to sell the bill. What he was saying recently about how people don't know what's in it. He was trying to go directly to these places, to Trump country, and say, hey, this is what is in here, and this is how it's going to improve your life, and this is why you should actually care about this. I mean, I don't, Biden's done speeches here and there, but it's bizarre to me that Biden sort of takes credit for the bills that he says, I wrote these bills and I campaigned on them. But compared to what Sanders has been doing, Biden's really been kind of in the background.
I mean, Biden specifically, like when he had Jen Psaki say, we're looking at a reconciliation bill and not the 3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, that's him not taking ownership of it and basically saying, we're going to whittle this stuff away.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I think it's worth thinking right now as basically his presidency seems to be kind of teetering on the brink of failure because this big, massive transformational bill that he promised is looking like it's going to get cut to pieces. Why is this happening? Because a few months ago, like I told you, I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm maybe I was wrong, and I'm pretty happy that I was wrong because he seems to be kind of heading somewhere. And after he passed that relief bill, there was this real momentum behind his presidency. He had the media fully behind him. Which is obviously very important. They were, just pumping out constant hagiography and constant kind of, press releases basically in his favor, and his approval ratings were high. People felt like it was, he was really doing this FDR thing, even if really, I mean, he wasn't quite as ambitious, but okay. And that would have been the perfect time to keep pushing and to go, okay, we passed this thing. Now let's go further. Let's use this moment to use this momentum to do the very difficult thing and get all 50 Democrats in the Senate on board with this even more expansive thing. That was a moment when Joe Manchin, who now, I know he's denied it, but there was that report that he's even thinking about leaving the Democratic Party now. But at that time, Manchin, completely unprompted, I believe, floated something like $4.5 trillion for an infrastructure bill, which is even higher than the compromise that Sanders ended up with that's going to get cut now. And I think it's because everything was sort of in Biden's favor. And unfortunately, he frittered it away because what did he do? He said, well, I also want to prove to people that we can still do things together, bipartisan, and still come together. And then months went by with just them screwing around, essentially trying to do this other bill that was basically part of that bill, but they'd split it off so that they can prove that they could get 10 Republicans on board. And all the momentum was lost. All these other kind of festering problems came to the fore because coronavirus kind of came back. There were some mistakes in terms of the administration's pandemic response. There was the Afghanistan withdrawal, which I support, and I know you guys did too. But that took a lot of political capital, and at that point, the media completely turned against him. And so all the cards that he was holding, he basically threw them away. And of course, now Manchin, who maybe was predisposed to support something more ambitious, I think probably looked at this and went, well, this guy's sort of tanking. Not only do I feel no pressure to support what he wants, but I also kind of, maybe it's not even a good thing for me to support what he wants because this is not going well. And now this is where we are now.
Yeah, and where we are is is an interesting and open question. I'm really curious as to your thoughts on this. I will just say, my prescription, one thing that is making me a little bit worried is as we're trying to build a stronger socialist movement and trying to bring people into thinking of themselves potentially as democratic socialists, etc. How closely tied that movement might seem to, I don't know, what seems like it might be a sinking ship, which is this reconciliation package and the infrastructure bill, right? In the sense that it's really important that Bernie's out there fighting to to get the things that we can get. We don't want to also be tied too much to a failed political project that might be Bidenism. But beyond that, I wanted to sort of ask your thoughts on this, because there were those initial oh Lord, he's FDR reincarnated. He's reluctant, but he's going to do it big. And it's funny now to hear all these complaints coming from Biden, and I know from Bernie as well, that the way that the media talks about these packages is by their price tag alone. But I have to say, especially early on, that was how a lot of progressive and squishy progressive journalists were talking about it, in the sense that this is a break from old school neoliberalism. This is a break from austerity politics. They're willing to spend a lot of money, and now we might be in some kind of new era of capitalism. I mean, do you think that that's a fair sort of claim against some of the people who were sort of writing these big stories about Biden during that time?
I suspect that the reason those stories were being written was the kind of regular liberal Democrats. I think were fully on board with whatever Biden wanted to do because he was the guy that beat Trump, and also they just kind of people want to pretend like everything was fine now. And I think that those pieces were more kind of we need to get the lefty people on board. We have to convince them and see, look how huge these spending bills that he's proposing are. That's a real difference from before. And I mean, in terms of what it represents, whether it's a new world or not, I mean, I think this entire time after, through the pandemic, even when Trump was in power to now, I think we're in the middle of something new being born. I don't know quite what that is. It's clear that, when the IMF is consistently talking about, forgetting about deficits and better social spending and creating a kind of robust social safety net. I think presumably because they're looking at the sort of threats to democracy from what has happened over the last 40 years. I think that something has changed, obviously. But I don't think it's quite to the scale that some people are saying. I don't think we're in some sort of radically different stage than where we were before. I think some of the rules have changed, and some of the rules also that kind of govern how we thought about politics or how we should structure society are kind of vulnerable, if not kind of crumbling. And I think that presents opportunities. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think the fact that Biden felt pressured enough by kind of right-wing attacks to let unemployment insurance go by the wayside. I think that that's a really good example of that. Clearly some of the old rules are still there, and they're still fighting to be heard.
I mean, like on that and like eviction, the eviction moratorium, all of these things that were under threat. There were some like, I don't know, kind of slight defenses you were seeing from Biden and the team there. But I mean, just going back to some of the FDR, comparisons, like these things were extremely damn popular with people. Also, so were the stimulus checks. And I feel like there was a real missing of the moment from Biden and his team. I mean, like, I'm not trying to give out too much free advice to political opponents, but, you say we own these things. These are what we deliver to you. And, these are things that are popular with folks across the board. They're popular here in Texas. And all that you saw was this real desire to, I don't know, run away from them, or I don't know, give these kind of weak defensive for them. I do think, I agree with you that like sort of shows that, yeah, we probably haven't entered into a new era yet.
Yeah. I mean, and also to a large extent, I mean, on the one hand, yes, I've been surprised at how, I guess, progressive Biden's been, compared to the Biden of old. But it's also when you take stock of what Trump did and what Biden's done, I mean, a lot of what he's done is pretty conservative. I mean, that relief bill had a lot of spending, had a lot of individually good programs that weren't maybe huge structural changes, but were designed to kind of rectify historical injustices and to deal with the crisis at that time, as the pandemic was raging and the economy was shot. But I mean, in terms of kind of permanent stuff, as people point out, that relief bill didn't do anything permanent. It did the child tax credit for a year. That was it. Biden had to be pressured to do the eviction moratorium, to renew it, to actually even fight to try and renew it, which is just Trump's policy. I mean, and you would think a guy who was the new FDR would kind of go above and beyond what his like very right-wing predecessor did. But it's basically, and the other thing that Biden did, of course, was the $2,000 checks, or the $1,600 checks.
Asterisk.
And I mean, listen, those were good, those were popular, but again, that was done under Trump. I mean, it's kind of stunning to me how much his administration has been a continuation of Trump in those ways, and also in the bad ways, immigration and
I mean, the border here. No, I mean, I'm telling people that, I mean, obviously Biden is somebody whose political vision I very much reject. And I think that it's important for socialists not to get, I don't know. I think it's really important at times to make sure it's very, very clear that we view these people as political opponents. But I will say that there are a lot of things that are very frightening for the future that I've been looking at. I don't think people have really reckoned with enough. You look like what happened here in Texas in 2020, when everybody was talking a big game that he might be able to pick up the state potentially. Let's not even talk about what happened in the state house here, which was an absolute disaster. But you look at South Texas, you look at the Rio Grande Valley, and Trump was able to eat into the Democratic Party strongholds in Hispanic communities there, and everybody sort of, I don't know, forgot about it because obviously the news cycle moves quickly. But when they went in and they talked to people why you switch your vote from typically voting Democrat to voting for Donald Trump of all people, right? You live on the border. You're a person he's accusing of all these horrible things. People would say things that are very basic. It's like, hey, those relief checks are very helpful. Hey, these kind of like emergency programs are really helpful. And it worries me a lot that there's been this kind of, I don't know, rejection of like really highlighting that in Biden's politics and even for the Democratic Party at a national level, while also seeing the places where they were winning was doing this kind of, I don't know, cultural stuff, credentialist stuff, where they were able to win in the South in particular, were in these kind of wealthier, more traditionally Republican, suburbs, right? And I'll tell you one thing about those voters: they're not loyal at all to the project of building mild liberalism. So I think